Before we begin, we publish new content every day. So be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. Nobody from my family came to my wedding. That single sentence contains 43 years of heartbreak, but also the seed of my liberation. I am Sophie, 64 years old now, and I have spent most of my life being the family caretaker, the one who bends until she nearly breaks, the one who always says yes when everyone else says no. But that empty church on my wedding day changed everything. Let me tell you how I finally learned to say no back. Growing up as the middle child of 5 in a working-class family in Detroit, I learned early that love was conditional. My older siblings, Marcus and Patricia, were the achievers. My younger ones, Danny and Lisa, were the babies who needed protection. I was the reliable one. The one who helped Mama with the cooking and cleaning. The one who babysat without complaint. The one who gave up her allowance so Danny could have new shoes for school. Mama used to say I was her little helper, and I wore that title like a badge of honor. When Daddy left when I was 12, I stepped up even more. I got a job at the corner store after school, helped with homework, mediated fights between my siblings. I thought if I just did enough, gave enough, sacrificed enough, I would earn the kind of unconditional love I watched them give each other so freely. The pattern followed me into adulthood. When Marcus needed money for college, I worked double shifts at the diner and sent him what I could. When Patricia got pregnant at 17, I helped raise little Jamal while she finished high school. When Danny got into trouble with drinking, I bailed him out literally and figuratively more times than I can count. When Lisa wanted to move to California to pursue acting, I co-signed her car loan and helped with her security deposit. Meanwhile, I put my own dreams on hold. I had wanted to be a teacher, had even gotten accepted to Wayne State. But the family needed me. There was always another crisis, always someone who needed my help more than I needed my education. I told myself this was what families did for each other. I told myself my turn would come. I met Robert when I was 39. He was a gentleman, a widower with 2 grown children who lived out of state. He owned a small repair shop and had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. For the first time in my life, someone was taking care of me instead of the other way around. He brought me flowers on Tuesdays for no reason. He listened when I talked about my day. He held my hand during movies and never once asked me to lend him money or solve his problems. When Robert proposed 2 years later, I was over the moon. I called my family immediately, expecting them to share my joy. The responses I got should have prepared me for what was coming, but I was too blinded by happiness to read the signs. Marcus congratulated me but said he was not sure he could make it because he had a big presentation at work around that time. Patricia seemed distracted during our conversation, more concerned about Jamal's college applications than my engagement. Danny made jokes about me being an old bride, and while he said he would try to be there, I could hear the dismissiveness in his voice. Lisa was the most hurtful. She said she was happy for me but reminded me that I had never helped her with her own wedding planning 5 years earlier, conveniently forgetting that she had eloped without telling any of us until after the fact. But Mama's reaction cut the deepest. She listened quietly as I told her about Robert, about our plans for a small ceremony at the local church, about how happy I was. Then she sighed and said, "Sophie, honey, you know I want you to be happy, but are you sure this is not just desperation? You are not getting any younger, and settling for the first man who shows you attention might not be the answer." I felt like she had slapped me. After years of watching her celebrate every milestone in my siblings' lives with enthusiasm and pride, this was how she responded to mine. But I swallowed the hurt, as I always did, and told myself she was just worried about me. I told myself she would come around. The months leading up to the wedding were a masterclass in disappointment. One by one, my family members found reasons why they could not attend. Marcus had that work presentation, which somehow became a crucial business trip that could not be rescheduled. Patricia decided Jamal's college interview was more important, even though I had offered to help reschedule the wedding around his needs. Danny claimed he could not afford the time off work, despite me offering to cover his lost wages. Lisa said she had a big audition, her first real opportunity in years. Mama was the last holdout, and I clung to the hope that she would be there. But 3 days before the wedding, she called to tell me she had thrown out her back and could not sit through a ceremony. When I offered to postpone everything, to help take care of her, she brushed me off and said not to make a fuss. It was better this way, she said. Less stress for everyone. The morning of my wedding, I stood in front of the mirror in the small bridal room at the church, adjusting my simple cream-colored dress for the 10th time. It was nothing fancy, just a knee-length dress I had bought off the rack. But I had never felt more beautiful. Robert had made me feel worthy of love, worthy of celebration. I had imagined sharing this moment with my family, had pictured Mama crying happy tears, had thought about dancing with Marcus, about Patricia helping me fix my veil. Instead, I was alone with Mrs. Henderson, our elderly neighbor who had volunteered to be my witness, and Robert's best friend Jim, who was serving as both best man and the person to walk me down the aisle since I had no one else. The church, which could seat 200 people, held maybe 15. Robert's few friends and co-workers, some neighbors, my boss from the insurance company where I had worked for 15 years. That was it. As I walked down the aisle, my heels echoing in the nearly empty church, I felt the weight of 41 years of unreciprocated devotion. Every birthday I had remembered when mine was forgotten. Every crisis I had handled while my own needs went unmet. Every sacrifice I had made that was taken for granted, crystallized into this moment of absolute clarity. I was walking toward the only person who had ever prioritized my happiness, while behind me sat the proof that I had given the best years of my life to people who could not even give me 3 hours of their time. But I kept walking. Robert's face was radiant as he watched me approach, and in that moment, I made a choice. I chose him. I chose us. I chose to stop waiting for my family to love me the way I had loved them. The ceremony was beautiful despite everything. Robert's vows made me cry, and when he slipped the simple gold band on my finger, I felt something shift inside me. For the first time in my life, I was someone's first priority. Not because I had earned it through endless giving, but simply because he loved me. The reception was small but joyful. Mrs. Henderson gave a toast about how love can bloom at any age. Jim told embarrassing stories about Robert that made everyone laugh. My boss, Mr. Peterson, surprised me by presenting us with a beautiful photo album as a gift from the office. These people, who owed me nothing, had shown up for me in a way my own family had not. Later that evening, as Robert and I slow danced to our wedding song in the nearly empty reception hall, my phone buzzed with text messages. My family, checking in to see how the day had gone, as if they were inquiring about a doctor's appointment rather than the most important day of my life. Marcus sent a gif of congratulations. Patricia forwarded me a meme about marriage. Danny asked if I had any leftover cake. Lisa sent a selfie from her audition with the message, "Thinking of you today." I turned off my phone without responding to any of them. The next morning, as Robert and I packed for our modest honeymoon to a bed and breakfast in Mackinac Island, I felt lighter than I had in years. But that feeling was quickly tested when Mama called, wanting to know all about the wedding, asking me to come over and show her pictures, suggesting we have a little family celebration now that the real wedding was over. For the first time in my adult life, I said no. I told her that Robert and I were leaving for our honeymoon, and we would talk when we returned. She sounded shocked, as if the idea that I might not drop everything to accommodate her schedule was incomprehensible. Our honeymoon was magical. We walked along the lake, rode bikes around the island, and talked for hours about our dreams for the future. Robert wanted to expand his repair shop, maybe hire an apprentice. I confessed that I had always wanted to finish my degree. maybe become a substitute teacher. He encouraged me, told me it was not too late, that we could make it work financially if that was what I wanted. Being with someone who believed in my dreams, instead of expecting me to abandon them for the sake of everyone else's, was intoxicating. I started to remember who I was before I became the family caretaker, before I learned to make myself small so others could shine brighter. When we returned from our honeymoon, I found 17 missed calls from various family members. Danny had been arrested again for drunk driving and needed bail money. Patricia's husband had lost his job, and they were behind on their mortgage. Lisa's car had been repossessed, and she was stranded in Los Angeles. Marcus needed someone to watch his kids for a week, while he and his wife took a vacation to celebrate their anniversary. In the past, I would have sprung into action immediately. I would have liquidated my small savings account, taken time off work, made myself available for whatever crisis needed managing. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with Robert's hand in mine and felt nothing but exhaustion. Robert did not tell me what to do. He just listened as I explained the history, the patterns, the endless cycle of giving that had defined my relationships with my family for decades. Then he asked me a simple question that changed everything. "Sophie," he said gently, "when was the last time any of them called you just to see how you were doing? Not because they needed something, but just because they love you and wanted to hear your voice." I could not answer him, because the truth was, they never had. Every conversation was transactional. Every relationship was defined by what I could provide, not who I was as a person. That night, I called each of them back. I told Danny that I could not bail him out this time, that I hoped he would use this as motivation to get serious about his drinking problem, but that I would not enable him anymore. I told Patricia that I was sorry about John's job loss, but that Robert and I were not in a position to help with their mortgage. And perhaps it was time for her to ask Marcus, who made significantly more money than I did. I told Lisa that I could not rescue her from Los Angeles, but that if she wanted to come home and start over, she was welcome to stay with Mama for a while until she got on her feet. I told Marcus that I would not be watching his children, that he would need to find alternative childcare arrangements, and that maybe he should consider asking Patricia, since she was always complaining about needing extra income. Each conversation was met with shock, then anger, then attempts at emotional manipulation. Danny accused me of abandoning the family. Patricia cried and said she could not believe I had become so selfish since getting married. Lisa called me heartless for leaving her stranded. Marcus was perhaps the most cutting, suggesting that my new husband was obviously a bad influence who was turning me against my own blood. But their words bounced off me in a way they never had before. I had Robert to come home to, someone who valued my peace of mind more than my ability to solve problems. Someone who held me while I cried not from guilt, but from grief for all the years I had wasted trying to earn love that was never going to be freely given. 3 weeks after the wedding, Mama called. She was furious. The family was in chaos without their usual problem solver, and she wanted to know what had gotten into me. She accused me of thinking I was better than them now that I was married, of forgetting where I came from, of being ungrateful for all the love they had shown me over the years. That last accusation broke something open in me. I found myself asking her, in a voice steadier than I had ever used with her before, to help me understand what love looked like to her. Because from where I sat, it looked like 43 years of me giving everything I had while they took it all for granted. It looked like not one member of my family caring enough about my happiness to show up to my wedding. It looked like them only calling when they needed something, and never once asking how I was doing or what I needed. Mama was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that revealed everything I needed to know about how she saw me. "Sophie, you never seemed to need anything. You were always so strong, so capable. We knew you could handle things. That is love too. Trusting someone to be strong." I realized then that she genuinely believed this. She had convinced herself that taking advantage of my willingness to sacrifice was actually a form of respect. That never asking about my needs meant she thought I did not have any. That treating me like an endless resource, instead of a person with dreams and limitations, was somehow a compliment to my character. I told her I needed some time to think, and I hung up. Then I cried for 3 hours straight, mourning not just the relationship I had hoped to have with my family, but the version of myself who had believed that if I just gave enough, loved enough, sacrificed enough, I would finally be worthy of the same consideration I had always shown them. The months that followed were the hardest and the most liberating of my life. My family tried everything to pull me back into the old patterns. They sent flying monkeys in the form of family friends who told me I was breaking my poor mother's heart. They tried guilt, manipulation, anger, and even periods of silence meant to punish me into submission. But I had Robert, and I had something else I had never had before. I had myself. For the first time in my adult life, I was not defined by how useful I could be to other people. I was learning who Sophie was when she was not frantically trying to earn love through service. I enrolled in night classes to finish my bachelor's degree. It was challenging, studying alongside people young enough to be my children, but Robert encouraged me every step of the way. He quizzed me for exams, celebrated every A, and never once complained about the time it took away from our household. Meanwhile, my family was learning to function without me. Danny, faced with the real consequences of his actions for the first time, finally entered a treatment program. Patricia got a job and started managing her own finances. Lisa came back to Detroit and moved in with Mama, which forced them both to deal with their relationship without me as a buffer. Marcus hired a babysitter like a normal person when he wanted to go out with his wife. They were all fine. They were all capable of solving their own problems when they did not have me to fall back on. This should have been a relief, but instead, it was heartbreaking. It meant that all those years of sacrifice had not been necessary. They had let me exhaust myself being their safety net, not because they needed me to, but because it was easier than taking responsibility for their own lives. A year after my wedding, I graduated with my bachelor's degree in education. The ceremony was small, held in the same church where Robert and I had been married. This time, the pews were not empty, but they were filled with different people. Robert, of course, beaming with pride. Mrs. Henderson, who had become like a grandmother to me. My classmates, who had embraced me despite our age difference. My professors, who had celebrated my determination to return to school after so many years. Peterson from work, who had given me the flexibility I needed to complete my degree. My family was not there, and for the first time, their absence did not feel like a wound. It felt like freedom. 2 days after graduation, Patricia called. She congratulated me on finishing school, and there was something different in her voice. Less entitlement, more genuine warmth. She asked if I wanted to have lunch with her, just the two of us, so she could hear about my experience going back to school. I almost said no automatically, but something made me pause. Maybe it was the tone in her voice, or maybe it was the fact that she was asking to see me without needing anything. I agreed to meet her at a small cafe downtown. The lunch was awkward at first. Patricia seemed genuinely nervous, as if she did not know how to interact with me without a crisis to bond over. But slowly, we found our way to real conversation. She told me about her job, about Jamal's success in college, about the therapy she had started to deal with her anxiety about money. She asked about my classes, about Robert, about my plans now that I had my degree. Then she said something that surprised me. "Sophie, I owe you an apology. Not just for the wedding, though that was terrible, for all of it. For taking advantage of your kindness for so many years. For never asking how you were doing or what you needed. For treating you like you were not a real person with your own life and dreams." I felt tears prick my eyes. but I did not let them fall. This was what I had wanted to hear for so long. But now that it was here, I realized it did not change anything fundamental. The years of neglect could not be undone with an apology, no matter how sincere. But it was a beginning. Patricia asked if we could try to build a new kind of relationship, one where she saw me as a whole person instead of just the family problem solver. I told her I was willing to try, but that things would have to be different. I could not go back to being the person who said yes to everything and never asked for anything in return. She nodded, and I could see she meant it. The Patricia sitting across from me was not the same person who had dismissed my engagement and skipped my wedding. Losing access to my unlimited support had forced her to grow up in ways she never had before. Over the following months, other family members reached out tentatively. Danny, 6 months sober, called to apologize and to tell me about his recovery program. He did not ask for anything, which was so unusual that I almost did not know how to respond. Marcus sent a card congratulating me on my graduation, along with a photo of his family and a note saying he hoped we could rebuild our relationship. Lisa was the holdout. She was still angry that I had not rescued her from Los Angeles, still convinced that my refusal to enable her was proof that I did not love her. Mama, caught between her desire to have her family back together and her inability to acknowledge that the old dynamics had been harmful, kept trying to convince me to reach out to Lisa first, to be the bigger person, to forgive and forget. But I was done being the bigger person. Being the bigger person had meant making myself smaller for decades. I told Mama that Lisa knew where to find me when she was ready to apologize and build a healthier relationship, but that I would not chase after her or pretend that her behavior was acceptable just to keep the peace. This was perhaps the hardest boundary to maintain, because it meant accepting that I might lose Lisa permanently. But I had learned that love without respect is not really love at all. And Lisa had never respected me enough to see me as anything more than a resource to be exploited. 2 years after my wedding, Robert and I renewed our vows. This time, it was not a wedding but a celebration of what we had built together and who we had become as individuals and as a couple. The ceremony was in our backyard, with string lights and flowers from my garden. About 30 people attended, including Patricia and her family, Danny with his girlfriend from his recovery group, and Marcus with his wife and kids. Mama came too, in a wheelchair pushed by a nurse I had hired for the day. She was frailer than she had been 2 years earlier, but her eyes were bright as she watched Robert and me exchange new vows that reflected not just our love for each other, but our commitment to building a life based on mutual respect and support rather than duty and obligation. Lisa was not there, but she had sent a card the week before. It was not an apology exactly, but it was an acknowledgement. She wrote that she was proud of me for building a life that made me happy, and that she hoped someday we could find our way back to each other. It was not everything I had wanted from her, but it was something. As Robert and I danced to the same song we had danced to at our wedding, I thought about the woman I had been that day 2 years earlier. She had been so afraid of losing the love of her family that she had nearly lost herself. She had equated her worth with her usefulness, her value with her willingness to sacrifice. The woman dancing in her backyard garden, surrounded by people who loved her for who she was rather than what she could provide, was someone entirely different. She had learned that saying no could be an act of love, both for herself and for the people who needed to learn to stand on their own feet. She had discovered that her dreams mattered, that her needs were valid, that her happiness was not selfish but necessary. Most importantly, she had learned that the kind of love worth having is the kind that exists without conditions, without transaction, without the constant need to earn it through service and sacrifice. The kind of love Robert had shown her from the beginning, and the kind of love she had finally learned to show herself. Standing in my garden, surrounded by laughter and music and genuine affection, I realized that the empty church on my wedding day had not been a symbol of my family's indifference. It had been a symbol of my liberation. Every empty pew had represented a chain I no longer carried, a burden I no longer bore, a version of myself I no longer had to be. Nobody from my family came to my wedding, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it forced me to stop waiting for them to love me the way I deserved and start loving myself that way instead. And once I did that, I discovered that there were plenty of people in the world ready to love me too. Not for what I could give them, but for who I was when I finally had the courage to be myself. Today, at 64, I am a substitute teacher who loves her job, a wife who is cherished by her husband, a sister and daughter who is respected by the family members who chose to do the work to rebuild their relationships with me, and a woman who has learned that the most radical thing I can do is value my own happiness as much as I once valued everyone else's. My wedding day taught me that an empty room can sometimes be fuller than a crowded one, that the people who show up are more important than the people who do not, and that love given freely is infinitely more valuable than love you have to beg for. Nobody from my family came to my wedding, but everyone who mattered was there, including the most important guest of all, the woman I was finally ready to become.